Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you've joined me today. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. And I have a great guest coming on the program. He's been on before, Steve Baker, the Pragmatic Constitutionalist. You can find him at tpc4usa.com. Read his work, support him. He's also an investigative reporter at The Blaze. Steve, welcome to the program. How are you today?
Hey, Nick. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad you could be here. Obviously, it's now a week has passed since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And, you know, obviously the leftist ideology, we're seeing the violence. What are your thoughts now that a week has passed? You had a week to really think and reflect on this. What are your thoughts?
You know, the reality is it was several days before I could even talk about it without getting emotional. Now, I personally never spent time with Charlie in the same room. I've been on his show a few times. Obviously, The Blaze, who I work for, has an incredible relationship with him. You know, Glenn's been one of his mentors since Charlie was 17 years old. So it really impacted the company and you know, on a deeply emotional, spiritual level, what took place. You know, it was very unusual because I've been with The Blaze a little over 2 years to see the entire newsroom suddenly engaged in a single moment on a single thing at such an intense level for a couple of days. It was, you know, it was all Charlie all the time as everyone's trying to make sense of this thing. The thing that affected me most, though, was what our editor-in-chief at The Blaze. His name's Matt Peterson. He's the guy that hired me. You know, a couple of summers ago, he called me up out of the blue. He said, "Hey, I've got this. You know, I've just become the editor-in-chief at The Blaze. I'm the new guy." And he said, I'm starting to ramp up and hire new people. We're particularly interested in having, you know, an investigative journalist. And he said, every time I call my friends in DC, your name keeps coming up, you know, so I thought I'd call you and talk to you and meet you. So that's how our relationship started. Well, what I've learned about is Matt also had a mentor relationship with Charlie as a Claremont fellow. And from the time Charlie was a kid, basically, even though Charlie didn't go to college, Matt was his professor, you know, and just a month ago, they did a podcast together in DC in which Charlie said, "Man, everything I've learned from you." So there's that closeness. Now I'm getting to the punchline. So when I was being prosecuted for my J6, you know, sins of being a journalist and walking inside the building with a camera on January 6, 2021, during my prosecution, Charlie was very aware of that, and he had me on his show to talk to me about the process and other things related to January 6th as I began doing investigations into that day. And then when it was getting up to the time where I was facing trial or not, and the timing was absolutely amazing in my case. My pretrial hearing was the day after the election this past November. So if anybody not familiar with my story, it took the DOJ over 3 years before they could finally even come to the place where they wanted to arrest me. All right. So they charged me with the 4 nonviolent misdemeanor charges. My pretrial hearing was the day after the election. It was a disaster. The judge hated me, and he obviously, Judge Christopher Cooper, clearly hated what happened the night before in the election with Trump winning. And so he just denied all our emotions. He was brutal in the pretrial hearing to myself and my attorneys. And so after we got off of the hearing and I got back on a Zoom call with all of my attorneys, and I said, guys, I'm not doing this. I'm not going through a shaming, because that's all this is the trial is just going to be a shaming exercise. I instructed my attorneys, based on the fact that Trump won, and he had promised in his campaign that he was going to, you know, issue pardons to at the very least, to the nonviolent J6 defenders. So I rolled the dice and I told my attorneys, I said, notify the court, notify the DOJ that I'm pleading guilty to all my crimes. pleading guilty next week on the 12th. Well, my editor-in-chief sends Charlie a note on the 8th because Charlie was on the transition team. He was actually working on this very issue with the president. And he sent a note. My editor-in-chief, Matt Peterson, sent Charlie a note explaining to him what I had decided to do. And Charlie wrote him back, and I have the screenshot in my phone. And Charlie wrote him back and said, to be sure and assure me, let me know, no worries, your guy's going to be taken care of. Full pardon's coming. And Charlie already had that advanced knowledge from being there that close to Trump. And that gave me the confidence to know that I could walk in, stand before that judge a week later. And the judge knew it too. The judge actually said to me that day, he said, well, he asked the clerk, he said, so when is Mr. Baker's sentencing hearing going to be? And she typed it in, looked it up, and she said, Your Honor, it'll be March the 6th. And Judge Cooper looked up at me and said, well, okay, well, Mr. Baker, since I'm probably not going to see you in March anyway, he knew it. He knew those pardons were coming. He said, I'm going to go ahead and dress you down for, the way I normally would during a sentencing hearing. So he proceeded for the next 7 or 8 minutes to give me a bunch of, grief. But the confidence was there that Charlie specifically addressed my case to the he advocated for me to the president. And so that was my touch point. But it's amazing the millions of people who never had that touch point with him, the way they responded, the tears, the emotions. It was.
I want to ask you about that because I think it's remarkable. I mean, when it happened, the way people felt, and it's not like they knew him personally. I didn't know Charlie personally. We communicated a couple times through email, but never really met or anything.
Right.
But the way that people looked at it and took it personally, what was it about him? When something like this happens to a politician, you don't see this type of outpouring of support. And, you'll see all right, we're sorry, condolences, whatever. But there's something about this moment that feels different. What do you think it is?
The first thing was we all witnessed the horrific violence. This was a public execution. I even told a friend last night it felt like a public crucifixion. I'm not elevating Charlie to that level. I'm certainly not deifying him, but I've tried to, in my own life experience, go back and remember the other times that I felt so viscerally, impacted by something like this. And I'm giving away my age, but I was around and old enough to remember Martin Luther King's assassination. I'm old enough to remember RFK. I don't remember JFK. And I certainly was not old enough and aware enough to be impacted by those in the way that this one did. But the only thing I've been able to compare this to is the way I felt for the day after the days following 9/11. And I've heard some other people say the same thing. At 9/11 was 24 years old. I was a fully engaged adult on the treadmill of life with 2 kids and, all of the trappings of middle class lifestyle and responsibilities. And this time felt just the same to me, but there was something else, I think, that is catching all of us by surprise, is seeing these prayer vigils and rallies and services all over the world for this guy. As I've been kind of, I'm not in Blaze HQ right now. I'm in a kind of a getaway retreat that I try to get away to once a year up in the
Bunker.
upper Midwest. Yeah, upper Midwest somewhere. My secret getaway place. And with the friends that I'm here with, we've had a lot. We've had discussions about this all weekend long, and trying to do the math emotionally, on why this impact is being felt by so many millions of people around the world. And you're seeing these celebrations of his life, his vigils for the death, in South Korea, New Zealand, Australia, France, Spain, Poland, all over the UK, not to mention, obviously, almost everywhere in the United States at this time. And then you hear that since he died, there's been 19,000 new filings for TPUSA chapters around the world. So it'll be TP, Czechoslovakia, TP Hungary, TP whatever, it's going to be everywhere. And I don't think there's a Czechoslovakia anymore. I shouldn't have said that.
Czech Republic, that's all.
The Czech Republic. But you know what I mean? And so I think none of us realized, we all knew that Trump doesn't win this election without Charlie Kirk. Everybody knows that. I don't care what political analyst you are, Trump does not. I don't care what side you come from. Everyone agrees. Without Charlie Kirk and the capture and that trend, that big swing of the male youth vote in Trump's direction this time, the Kamala Harris is president of the United States right now. And so we all acknowledge that, but I don't think that any of us understood how impactful on all of us were those little 2-minute, 1-minute reels that we've seen for years of Charlie debating on campus, speaking from a stage, very clear, very concise, his near photographic memory, his recall of facts, always filtering that through his faith. And as I said, as myself and my friends were all trying to process this thing and figure out why the impact is there, I've actually gotten in trouble with some of my left-wing friends because I do still have some associates from the other side of the aisle, and when I've actually said to them, "This is MLK level reaction," they go, "Oh man, I mean, it's claws out, hair, teeth, and eyeballs. I mean, it's like, how dare you?" And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, you don't understand the impact because you live in your own media information bubble.
Not for nothing, they were elevating George Floyd to MLK status.
Right.
Come on now.
So if as I always say, if the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, AP, UPI, if they don't say it, then it never happened. Well, the thing is, the only thing that they've ever said about Charlie Kirk is that he's a fascist, white nationalist, etc., white supremacist. That's the only thing those news outlets have ever said about him, and the only way they've ever characterized him. So those people on the other side in that bubble, that information bubble, they can't comprehend the impact because they have no idea. And so it's like, okay, guys, let me walk you through this. Let's go to YouTube. Let's go to X. Let's go to wherever we have to. And let me show you the celebrations of life and the vigils and the prayer services that are happening all over the world for this guy. You don't know it. You have no idea because you don't pay attention. But if you paid attention, you would get it.
Well, I think the scary part is when they see it, how angry some of them get, actually. And it really is disturbing. But we need to take a quick break. When we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about this, and then we're going to turn it to the bureaucracy. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits. And Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. So, Steve, in light of Charlie Kirk's assassination, doing essentially the most American thing you could possibly do. Engage in speech, exercise your free speech, engage in debate, particularly on a college campus that's supposed to be the marketplace of ideas.
Right.
Elevate your political opponents. I mean, let's face it, Charlie Kirk elevated his political opponents and gave them a platform as well as he was espousing conservative viewpoints. And for that, he was assassinated. Now, I keep on hearing in the media amongst Democrats that this is a both sides issue, that both sides are guilty of this level of violence. Both sides are the ones with the heated rhetoric that has led to this moment. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we know that it's absolutely incorrect. Now, the Minnesota shooter who, assassinated a couple of Minnesota politicians here a few weeks ago, he is absolutely a conservative. I mean, he was a right-leaning, conservative or voting individual, and certainly a longtime whack job. Apparently, our own Joe Hanneman here at the Blaze has done the best work of any reporter in the country on analyzing this guy's entire history, his entire life, the crimes itself, in a series of articles he's written at theblaze.com, if anybody wants to go look that up. But there's an example of a guy that votes and supported the president that committed an awful thing. But what I don't know the exact numbers. I don't have them in front of me right here. But we're up to what the last 22 out of the last 25 school shootings or something have been gender confused individuals. That's the polite way of putting it. It's the numbers are becoming overwhelming. That contrary to what Jasmine Crockett tells us, that she says, I mean, did you hear this last 80% of all violent crimes in this country are committed by white supremacists. It's like, darling, you're lying. You're lying with your fake accent. I mean, the fact that you're using a fake accent while you're telling this, being a hood rat with your use of English on purpose tells me that you also know that you're lying, and that that's not what the numbers look like. And in fact, I always take it to the other extreme, and I'm far more accurate than she is. If it wasn't for Democrats killing Democrats, Democrats shooting Democrats, violent crime in this country would drop 90%.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at where all the violent crime comes from, 100%. And even down to, when you look at Governor Josh Shapiro, wasn't a right-wing lunatic that tried to burn down his house and set him and his family on fire. It was a pro-Hamas supporter, and they wanted to kill him because he's Jewish. So when we see this whataboutism, what needs to happen now? Because I'm not seeing any remorse. Now, with the exception, I do have to, Bernie Sanders did release an 8-minute video. Fetterman has been largely consistent that the Democrat rhetoric has been over the top for quite some time, and they need to stop the Hitler references. But do you think this is going to change any behaviors? Or do you think how conservatives react, Republicans react to Charlie Kirk's death, maybe going out in massive waves and voting in local elections, not voting for people like Mamdani and getting maybe a Republican elected in New York? What sends a more powerful message?
Well, what we're already seeing, and these are all anecdotal things. We are seeing individuals that are being red-pilled by this moment. All right. They are looking at the facts, because the entire left-wing social media world went completely ape over the Groyper memo. They had decided that the shooter of Charlie Kirk's murderer was more MAGA than MAGA. He was right of MAGA, and that he was the reason he killed Kirk is because Kirk wasn't right-wing enough. And they bought it.
They're still putting it out there.
Right. They still are. And so I was in some of these message boards with some of the associates of people that I still talk to on the left, and they're just claws out at me. And I just said, guys, because of what I do for a living, my beat, with the Blaze is the intelligence community, the DOD, the FBI. These are my sources. And I already knew what was coming from the sources that we had. I knew, and it wasn't my place to get ahead of the investigators and to release this. And I know everybody wants to be first, and it looks like Fox got it first, that in fact, this guy has been in a intimate sexual relationship with his roommate partner, who is a male transitioning to a female, maybe even a furry. And so I just told the guys in this other left-wing chat group where I was, taking all the slings and arrows, I just said, bookmark this, bookmark it. We'll come back in a couple of days. Well, it was less than 24 hours later, the news got out. And then Axios was the first of the left-leaning publications to actually come out and say, yep, it's true. It's true. And so I just took that link to Axios and I took it over to that group and I dropped it in there. Silence. No
Crickets.
one. And they're not going to. And the guy that runs that thing is a journalist, left-wing, hard left journalist. And he totally bought into the Groyper thing. So, on my Facebook page, I even put the challenge out there. I said, hey, I would love to interview an honest left-leaning journalist who bit into the memo, because that's all it was. This wasn't organic. This was a memo that went out and they jumped on it. They elevated it. They shared it by the millions, and it was a lie. It was made up.
Well, I mean, they could have learned rules in emergency management. Usually when incidents are first breaking, there's a lot of false information out there, and just keep your mouth shut and wait till you get the information so you don't look foolish. But a lot of them don't care.
We were going through that. We were going through that with the editors on the Blaze all day Friday, all day Saturday. In our Blaze chat groups with the editors and the writers, we're talking about this. We know that the Groyper thing is a lie. We know that the truth is going to come out. We're just wait. And we're like, no, we're not going to be first. We're not going to be first. We're going to be right.
And so that's the way it should be.
We're waiting. And we let Fox and we let everybody else take the lead. And then even after Fox released it, this is how cautious we were. It was like, okay, I know who the leaker was to Fox. It was Bongino, by the way. And I know who the leaker was, and which is fine. But let's just wait until one of the mainstream, news service, and Axios jumped in, so we felt free to go. But it is a interesting world when we're having to deal with that level of disinformation. And it goes back to your original question, is that no, it's not going to change, but we are seeing individuals being red pilled. This is not going to suddenly change the mind of 1 million people on left-wing TikTok or Blue Sky or anything else like that. It's not.
That's a terrifying world when you go see what they're saying over there. I mean, that is terrifying.
I have a Blue Sky account for that very purpose, so I can go see what they're saying over there. And it is horrifying. I spent 30 minutes on Blue Sky right after it was confirmed that Charlie was dead, and it was frightening. And so the answer to your question is there are individuals that will be red pilled by this. There, just as there were from the storm in Western North Carolina, there were probably thousands of people red pilled by the lack of government response. These are, lefties that grew up in that Asheville, Buncombe County area, all the hippies and the artsy fartsy people that are up there. And then when they actually saw how FEMA treated them,
they realized
something was not right.
Definitely not. Now, we need to take a quick break, but when we get back, it's going to relate. I want to talk about the FBI and what's ahead. Everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits. And Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the PAS Report podcast. So, Steve, when it comes to political violence in the United States, two things. First, your thoughts, and I know it's speculation. Do you think we're going to see more political violence as a result of this, or do you think cooler heads could prevail? And on the second note, what is the FBI and the other communities saying about what they anticipate when it comes to political violence?
I mean, obviously the biggest fear is that we are, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing an escalation, particularly in what we're now calling the Trantifa movement. You know, the trans/Antifa group, because Antifa, Andy Ngo identified a long time ago in his book about the high level of gender confusion among Antifa's ground operatives, the people that are, and I know it's supposed to not be a real organization, but we all know it is, but there's a very high percentage. In some communities it's as low as 40%, and some it's 70% of their ground troops. And Antifa has been for years the de facto paramilitary arm of the DNC, the Democratic National Convention. They go out and they take care of the violent work that's needed to shape the narrative. And so one of the things that is happening under the new administration is, as you know, and again, going back to their own media and information bubble, they have been lied to over and over and over and over again and told that the Trump administration is going to line them up and put them in ovens. It's going to kill them. And so once they've been told that enough times, they believe it. And then when you get into people that are already mentally ill to begin with, if you're gender confused, everything's not working properly. And by the way, I know some actual conservative Trump voting MAGA trans people, and they know that they have a mental health problem. They know it. They confess it. And when you are dealing with people that are already in that place, they're also dealing with a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety. So what else are they doing? They're taking psychotropic drugs. They're taking these hard prescriptions for dealing with those depressions, those anxieties. And then on top of that, you have even the more fringe element of those who are basically mentally disturbed enough to either go shoot up Democrat politicians in Minneapolis, or to go kill and assassinate Charlie Kirk. There are people at this end, but they have been programmed by the left. It's there. Look.
Well, if you think everyone's a Nazi, if you think conservatives are really ending democracy, and you're going to be put in an oven, they believe they're virtuous, that they're doing the right thing, that they're saving democracy. And so, unfortunately, Democrats haven't reached it.
This is what's wrong. And look, that mindset is absolutely permeates our intelligence community, FBI, CIA, DHS, HSI.
Well, I want to ask you, because everyone needs to check out an article that you wrote last week. And we were talking about this before the Charlie Kirk death, trying to organize a day and time for you to come on to talk about how the FBI was still going after Catholics, how they were still targeting Catholics as if they're the biggest threat. They're domestic violent extremists, when we were told it was a Richmond product. One memo from the Richmond office, when that was a lie. It was operational through several different states and jurisdictions, and you had the FBI. So explain to the audience. And then related to Charlie Kirk's assassination and whether or not the FBI really has their priorities right.
Yeah, what we learned just a week or so ago was that a Catholic organization down in the New Orleans area, South Louisiana, had been infiltrated by the FBI. Not during the last administration, but even if they had been infiltrated by a CHS or an agent, a special agent themselves, they were still at it. They were still doing it. And so finally, in one of their private message groups, where 43 of these traditionalist Catholics have their own, private Telegram message board. One of them wrote something that could be construed as kind of coming up to the line of maybe a violent, insinuation, in which basically he was talking about a mosque or a Muslim group that was buying a Catholic church up in, I believe it was Maine. So they're in Louisiana. He's talking about this Catholic building that's being purchased and going to be converted to a mosque, and they don't like it. And so, he said something, it would be a shame, redacted, if, and I'm not redacting what he said. This is how he wrote it. It would be a shame, redacted, if someone redacted that building or what, you know what I mean? And so that's all he wrote. And, and people talk like that. People talk like that in just common conversation. Well, all of a sudden, he's got the FBI calling him. He's got the FBI coming and knocking on his door. And he's like, "Oh no, I'm not talking to you. I'm a lawyer. You can talk to my lawyer." But the FBI agent that actually was put on this case to come and call on this guy for that one sentence that he wrote in a private chat group revealed that they're still looking at these traditional Catholic groups. So it hasn't stopped. Now, whether they had just infiltrated it during the current administration or whether they were a holdover from the last administration, it doesn't matter. It's still going on. And the reason why it's still going on is because once you get past the 7th floor of the Hoover building, it's the same FBI. I mean, those 38,000, out of those 38,000 employees, there's probably, depending upon who you talk to, 60 to 80% of them are actively daily working against the Trump agenda. And in fact, some people are even making the excuse this morning in an article I read, actually on Fox News online, was that they believe that it was deep staters who lied to Cash on, the other evening when he said, we've got the suspect in custody, and then an hour and a half later,
that wasn't a good look.
While he's in the restaurant, the expensive restaurant, the exclusive restaurant, he gets the note that, oops, they let him go. He's got an alibi and he didn't do it. And the investigators back in Orem let him go. And so they're already making excuses and saying that was somebody sabotaging Cash to try and take him down. Well, I will give, look, I'm a really big critic of Cash right now. I'm not a fan. I'm very open about it. I have real problems with it, but I was rooting for him from day one. I was rooting for him before, he got the nomination. Well,
I think people like you and I had very high expectations that the FBI was going to be cleaned out.
Right. And all I've heard from them, and that includes my sources in the 7th floor of the Hoover building, is that it's much harder than you ever dreamed to clean this thing up. So I'm giving them grace in that regard. And I'm also giving Cash grace in that maybe he did get sabotaged. Maybe somebody did try to take him out by feeding him false information that they had the suspect and not just a person of interest worth interviewing. Maybe that really happened. It's certainly plausible. That said, Cash, you don't run to Twitter with any of that. I mean, and it's as I wrote on X this weekend, you don't take something like that, which is part of the investigative process, and just because you started an interview, this is not a mistake a local cop is going to make. A local detective from, whether we're talking about Utah, Idaho,
they'd be raked over the coals by their superiors if they made this mistake.
Absolutely. No, you don't go into you don't go into the interview process and then walk to the microphones and say, "We've got our man," which is what Cash did. He was so desperate for a win, desperate for a PR win, that he shot himself in the foot again. Even though he may have been fed that by a deep stater who wants to take him out, he took the bait. Shouldn't have. But that's his inexperience because he's never been a cop. I mean, he wears a badge, but he's never been a cop.
100%. And as far as the ideologues go in the FBI, as far as the ideologues in the federal government goes, it's not hard to see. I mean, 86% of the federal donations in the last presidential election went to Kamala Harris. It's not hard to see that these people have an ideology, and they put that ideology before the actual mission. And so do you see, I look at the January, you had the ISIS attack down in Louisiana. You see several school shootings, now the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Last year, we saw 2 political assassination attempts on President Trump. Has the FBI dropped the ball? I mean, they're supposed to be a law enforcement agency. The intel component was built out of 9/11. I think that was a big mistake. They should go back to strictly law enforcement. But it seems like their intelligence isn't too good, and the priorities are all wrong.
Yeah, it's the FBI needs to get out of so many facets of what they do. They need to go back to being an investigative agency. The United States as a country, we could use the value of a federal investigation bureau, but that's what it should be limited to. They don't need to be a policing agency. They don't need to carry guns. They don't need to be making arrests. They don't need a SWAT team. We need the resources. The federal government just simply has better resources than any state could possibly muster. And so in that regard, they have the ability to do forensic analysis, the scientific work of investigating crimes that the states can't do on their own. And for that reason, we need an investigative agency to do that federally and to assist in that. But they should never be given the right to serve a warrant on somebody or to make an arrest. That
we
needs
have the
to
marshals
happen.
for that.
That's right. This is either, if it's a federal crime, we have marshals for that. If it's a local crime, then we have state and local authorities, policing departments, sheriff departments, constables, state police. They don't need that, and those decisions should be made locally anyway, because typically the local sheriff knows better what's going on.
Well, usually they are. It's just that the FBI swoops in at the end. They're trying to take credit for it.
Yeah, well, and of course the other thing. I mean, if you go all the way back to Waco doesn't happen if the feds had listened to the local sheriff. The local sheriff's like, no, he's fine. He'll come in. That's all they had to do. I'll call him in. He'll come over. He'll sit down with us. He'll talk to us. And then if you want to slap cuffs on David Koresh right there, that's fine. You don't end up with a 2-month standoff and murdering 80-something people, which is what the feds ultimately did. And so that's if it had been kept in the hands of the local sheriff to serve the warrant or to make the arrest, or to at least go, hey guys, you can support me in this thing, but we're going to do it my way. And there's so many reasons why, and so many other aspects of the FBI that need to be dismantled, needs to be spread out and given to either other agencies or nixed altogether. It's like the breakup of AT&T, It needs the monopoly, and they're far and away outside of their constitutional mandate, their constitutional limits, and it's a machine. It's such a big, dark cult. My friend J. Michael Waller, who wrote the book Big Intel, he calls it the cult, and he's exactly right, because it doesn't matter who you replace the leader with. The cult still exists.
Absolutely.
And that's what they're struggling with right now. And again, I'm giving Cash and Dan and the new guy, from Missouri, I giving them enough grace to say they have an overwhelming problem and an overwhelming task, maybe insurmountable. But I think that they actually I think the president, look, I'm a fan of President Trump and his agenda, but I don't think the two guys he gave the 2 top positions to, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, are qualified for the task.
Well, and I think that the bureaucracy over the years has begun to emerge as the fourth branch of government, unencumbered from any checks and balances, and believes that they have more power than the legislative body and the executive body combined, which is really concerning because that's the biggest threat to the United States. That's the biggest threat to our liberties. And we have to pay attention. Everyone needs to check out Steve's work. You go to tpc4usa.com, The Pragmatic Constitutionalist. Steve, I could talk to you all day. I really enjoyed the conversation. You do great work over at The Blaze. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Nick. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.